Hi friends! So I recently rewatched all 10 of the films that came out during the Disney Renaissance era and was reminded of how magical they all are. This era took place over the span of the decade in between 1989 and 1999. It completely put Disney back on the map and gave them the power to basically take over the world. This ranking is purely based on my personal opinion, and I do want to preface by saying that I do really love the majority of these films. Many of them were a huge part of my childhood and influenced who I am today. There's a lot of films to cover, so let's jump right into them. Number 10 is the 1990 film The Rescuers Down Under. So this was actually my first time watching it, as for whatever reason, I was never introduced to it as a kid. Right off the bat, this film feels like it lacks that epicness and grandeur that the other Disney Renaissance films have. It's hard to believe that this film came out between the release of The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Even the animation style looks downgraded to me, which is wild because it was the first Disney film to be entirely digitally animated. But the style of animation reminds me more of Oliver and Company than The Little Mermaid. I think the biggest problem though for me is that I found the film's premise to be quite dull, and it is hard for me not to get distracted while watching it. Don't get me wrong, there is some action going on, but the film really lacks character development. There's also this love triangle between Bianca, Bernard, and Jack that just doesn't go anywhere. The only character that has even remotely of an arc is Bernard, as he shows off his bravery at the end of the film when saving Cody. I also felt that the poacher, Percival McLeach, was not that enticing of a villain. I was shocked when he tried to feed Cody to a basque of crocodiles, but other than that, he didn't make much of an impression. I didn't even remember his name until I Googled it after I finished watching. I do, however, like the world building they did for the mice. I liked watching them get around the world using different modes of transportation, and my favorite was definitely the adorable flying squirrel. But this film and Tarzan are the only two movies out of the Renaissance era that didn't feature sweeping musical numbers where characters belted out into song. It does slightly redeem itself by the end with a beautiful sequence where the characters glide through the air on the eagle's back, but I really wish that magic was part of the rest of the film. Number 9 is 1995's Pocahontas. So the only reason this film is number 9 and not number 10 is that Pocahontas has some beautiful songs and animation that were just not present in The Rescuers. Colors of the Wind and Just Around the Riverbend are stunning songs, and Judy Kuhn has an incredible voice that really pulls on my heartstrings. I also really love the colors in this film. They were very vibrant, and many of the still images look like they could be hung on a wall to see just how lovely the artwork is. Everything else, however, really needs work. The film came out when Hollywood was desperately trying to seem progressive while also being way too sympathetic to the point of view of the colonizer. Some lines just come off very insensitive, even when they are spoken by the villain. Like, for example,
"Do you think we'll meet some savages?"
If we do, we shall be sure to give them a proper English greeting.
By doing what exactly? Introducing disease and causing genocide? In the context of history, this whole film was a bizarre choice by the studio, as it was the first Disney film based on a real-life person, and that person just happened to have lived a very tragic life. I also think Kocoum was a better and more enticing love interest than Captain John Smith. He was a strong warrior and grew up with Pocahontas, so he actually knew who she was and seemed like he really cared about her. The most hilarious part of this film, though, happens during John Smith's and Pocahontas's meet cute, where Grandmother Willow sings "Listen to your heart, you will understand." Suddenly, like magic, they can understand and communicate with each other in English.
Pocahontas.
What? What did you say?
My name is Pocahontas.
Which was just so silly and ridiculous. Also, why does her friend also understand what they're saying to each other? I didn't see her get the "listen to your heart" memo.
Listen to your heart.
I'll give the film credit. It does have one moment where it was self-aware with this line.
"Why do you think those insolent heathens attacked us?"
Because we invaded their land and cut down their trees and dug up their earth.
And I also really like the side animal characters. Miko, Percy, and Flit are absolutely adorable. I also like Pocahontas as she shows bravery and is open-minded and stands up for what she believes in. But in essence, nothing really happens in this film. Pocahontas and John Smith meet and instantly fall in love. John Smith's friend accidentally shoots Kocoum. John Smith is blamed for that death and is then sentenced to death, but Pocahontas saves him. This just wasn't that compelling of a narrative. And then it ends with John Smith returning to England and saying this line,
But I can't leave you.
You never will. No matter what happens, I'll always be with you.
and we're supposed to believe that they have some epic romance, when in the sequel, the two don't even end up together in the Disney canon as she leaves him for a man named John Ralph, who is based on the real man Pocahontas married at the age of 17, who just so happened to force her to change her name to Rebecca.
This is insane. Nuts. Tell her she's crazy.
You're crazy.
I don't really know what Disney was thinking when releasing the sequel, but I digress. I will end on the note that I do like the ending of the film. The fact that Pocahontas stays with her tribe is excellent and refreshing because I think the film would have dove entirely off the deep end if she just happened to abandon her people for a man she knew for approximately 5 minutes. So number 8 is the 1990 film Tarzan. So I actually hadn't seen Tarzan in years and was really excited to rewatch this movie because I remember loving it as a kid and I wasn't disappointed. But I now know why its memory has never been solidly planted in my brain. The film has a powerful opening. Tarzan's parents are tragically killed by a cheetah, and this is mirrored by what happens to Kala's and Kerchak's baby gorilla. Kala adopts and decides to raise Tarzan as her own son, and my first thought was, can a gorilla feed milk to a baby child? I don't think so. But anyway, I know this is a Disney movie and it's loosely based off of a book. I just found it really funny. I also found it hilarious that Tarzan could just phonetically say his name to Jane, despite never hearing his name spoken in human tongue before.
Tarzan. Tarzan.
But I know it's a children's film and there are far more ridiculous but endearing things in it, like this adorable monkey obsessed with a portrait of himself, and the fact that an elephant can see through his trunk underwater. What I really loved about Tarzan was the animation and the characters. The film was revolutionary in terms of animation because the budget that was given to it was larger than any of the other films in the Renaissance era. They developed the deep canvas animation technique for Tarzan's smooth tree surfing, and it looks stunning. Just look at these lovely sequences. The artists created a remarkable rendition of the jungle. It really feels alive and the backgrounds are incredibly detailed and lush. I also really love the character of Jane. She definitely still falls into the damsel in distress category of Disney heroines, but it makes a lot of sense for her character. She's an early 20th century woman in a bustle skirt and heels, stuck in the African jungle. I really don't expect her to be a skilled fighter or a survivor, and her bubbly quirks make her a really charming character.
I never was surrounded.
What did you do?
And Daddy, they took my boot.
They took those are the ones I bought you.
Also, her sexual tension with Tarzan is hilarious and very interesting for a Disney film. She basically illustrates a young girl's romantic fangirl angst with all of her detailed sketches of an almost naked man. When Tarzan takes Jane's glove off, I was like, oh my goodness, this is a little spicy for a Disney film. My biggest problem with Tarzan was the pacing, as it moves very slow until the other human characters arrive. I also don't think Clayton was a very menacing villain. His motive was a little boring, and I don't find him intimidating at all. And lastly, though I love Phil Collins' music in this film and always get a kick out of the nostalgia it gives me, the movie would have been a lot stronger if there were proper musical numbers where the characters break out into songs. The one musical number we do get is horrible. It might be Disney's worst original song, and it has no lyrics. I would have loved a love song for Tarzan and Jane where we'd see the two expressing their feelings and learning about one another. Without this song, their romance feels very hollow because we just hear Phil Collins' voice singing about it. The YouTuber Sideways wrote an excellent video essay about why the music in Tarzan is good but weakens the film's overall emotional message. You should definitely check it out. But to sum things up, Tarzan is a solid film, but I just thought it had a few problems with the way they delivered the story. Number 7 is 1992's Aladdin. Okay, so I remember liking Aladdin a lot more as a little kid and was actually a little disappointed on my rewatch. Don't get me wrong, the film is definitely still a classic, and in my opinion, it has one of the best soundtracks of all of the Disney Renaissance films, from Arabian Nights to Friend Like Me to Prince Ali, and of course, A Whole New World. The songs in the film are incredibly catchy and often get stuck in my head. In particular, A Whole New World is stunning, but I actually think the magic carpet ride doesn't do much to convince the audience that the two characters have fallen in love. They're basically just taking a lovely scenic route around the world while basking in the beauty of the scenery. It doesn't really develop the relationship at all on an emotional level, so it makes the connection between Jasmine and Aladdin a little dull. The friendship, however, between Genie and Aladdin is what makes this movie so special. I think the film doesn't really take off until the first appearance of the Genie.
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck.
By no doubt, Robin Williams is the star of this film as he enriches each scene he's in with his charismatic, charming, and hilarious performance.
That's a good move. I can't believe it. I'm losing to a rug.
And by comparison, Jasmine and Aladdin just didn't stand a chance against him in terms of film presence. I do, however, still think Aladdin is a very fun character with his kindness, wit, and incredible parkour skills. The scene where he shares his bread with the starving children on the street was very sweet. And I also like how Aladdin demonstrates his cunning when he manipulates the genie to get them out of the Cave of Wonders without even using a single wish. This foreshadows Aladdin's ability to trick Jafar at the end of the film, so I thought it was cool that the writers included that. Jasmine also is a character with spunk, and I like how she doesn't let anyone walk all over her, but I don't think there was much more depth to her character. I was actually pretty shocked when she said this line,
Go jump off a balcony.
What?
Stop her!
I thought it was pretty harsh, and I know the writers put it in to make a seamless transition to A Whole New World and that it was lighthearted, but that's a pretty brutal thing to say to someone. With all that said, I do think the climax of Aladdin is very well done and the tension is executed perfectly to keep us audience on edge. Not only has Jafar become the Sultan and the most powerful sorcerer in the world, but he sent Aladdin to some frozen wasteland, reduced Jasmine's father to a court jester, and wants to force Jasmine to become his wife. If the rest of the movie was like this ending, I think it would rank a lot higher on my list. Oh, and I know you're probably really tired of hearing about this plot hole, but I really don't understand why Aladdin couldn't just lend the genie's lamp to Jasmine for her to wish him into a prince, and then he'd have his last wish to set the genie free. Or Jasmine could set the genie free and Aladdin could use up his third wish to become a prince. But I digress. I know plot holes in stories like these are often inevitable. Number 6 is 1989's The Little Mermaid. So The Little Mermaid is the film that kicked off the Disney Renaissance and made the whole world fall in love with animation again. Right away, this movie draws you in with the magical underwater setting and a stunning orchestral version of Part of Your World. But what truly makes this film unique are the characters, specifically Ariel and Ursula. Ariel is a character that many children can relate to as she epitomizes teenage angst and wanting freedom when she's transitioning into adulthood. We learn so much about her in the song Part of Your World, and I think Ariel is often thrown under the bus by those who criticize her. I often hear people say that Ariel is the anti-feminist Disney princess as she gives up her voice to be with a man. but I disagree, and I think that's a huge misrepresentation of her character. Before Ariel even sees Eric, she's singing about desperately wanting to be on land with the humans and has been collecting human trinkets that she deeply cherishes. She quite literally wants more from her life than just being a princess, and she wants the freedom to discover herself outside of the underwater kingdom of Atlanta.
I'm 16 years old. I'm not a child
Don't
anymore.
you take that tone of voice with me, young lady. As long as you live under my ocean, you'll obey my rule.
King Trident is the embodiment of the overprotective and controlling parent who is overbearing due to fear of losing his child. When Trident has his angry outburst, it pushes Ariel over the edge and she decides to find a way to escape her reality. So, she visits Ursula and trades her voice for human legs. I also really like that Ariel has a lot of agency in this film and does not fit into the damsel in distress trope that so many other Disney princesses fall into. She's the one who saves Eric from drowning in the shipwreck, and though she goes about it the wrong way, she takes action to make her dreams a reality. I also really love Ursula in this movie, as she is one of Disney's best and most badass villains. Ursula's actions continuously raise the stakes in the film, from stealing Ariel's voice, to casting a spell on Eric, to forcefully taking over the underwater kingdom, to turning King Trident into a lifeless polyp. There isn't a dull moment when she's on screen, and her ultimate demise is also epic when she's stabbed by Eric's ship. My only problem with the movie's story is that it suggests that Eric falls in love with Ariel when she cannot speak. This means that he only quote-unquote loves her for superficial reasons like her singing voice and beauty throughout the whole film. Sure, she can communicate with
Body language.
but he doesn't get a full grasp of her personality until she inevitably gets her voice back, and then she immediately gets married. But all of that aside, this movie is a treasure, and it is no wonder that this film set off Disney's most memorable era in cinema. Number 5 on my list is the 1997 film Hercules. What I love about Hercules is that it is just pure fun and delightful to watch, from the muses as the omnipresent narrators to the hilarious Hades to Megara and Zeus. The film is hugely entertaining due to its incredible ensemble of characters. Let's start with Megara. She may be my favorite Disney character out of all of the Renaissance heroines due to her free-spirited, sassy, and quick-witted personality.
Aren't you a damsel in distress?
I'm a damsel. I'm in distress. I can handle this. Have a nice day.
I just love how cynical and real she is.
Well, you know how men are. They think no means yes and get lost means take me, I'm yours.
And her motivations throughout the movie make complete sense. We learn that she literally sold her soul to save the one she loved, and he then betrayed her for another woman. It is no wonder that she's then skeptical about love and guarded with her heart. And due to her past decisions, she is now indebted to Hades and is in desperate need of a way out. She put herself first and betrayed Hercules because she's not the type of girl to fall in love at first sight. We see her feelings change and her character progress through her power ballad, I Won't Say I'm in Love. She arguably goes through the most significant transformation in the film, as at the beginning, she's willing to do anything she can to free herself of Hades, but at the end, she sacrifices her life to save Hercules and opens up her heart to love again. Hercules is also the best Disney prince, as he is sweet, a little quirky, courageous, kind, and respectful to Meg, even when she's clearly coming on to him. Hercules does not feel like he belongs at the beginning of the film, and that is demonstrated through his song Go the Distance. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this song, and it's definitely no part of your world, but it conveys what it's supposed to, that he's felt isolated and alone his entire life and must rediscover himself in order to be happy. I also enjoyed his transformation sequence, but was really not a fan of Danny DeVito's song One Last Hope. I think the song was the weakest one in the movie and took away the potential from a truly epic moment. But my biggest issue was that there were tonal problems at some points, like when Megara gets literally squished by a tower and it's immensely sad and dramatic. And then all of a sudden, we leave her and get this very lighthearted and honestly kind of silly battle.
Yeah, Hercules! Thank you, man!
We then switch right back to Meg dying, and I felt like I was getting whiplash from the discrepancy in emotions that the film wanted me to feel in the moment. The animation was also a little weird at times, like when Hercules fights the giant purple monster. The monster has weird cell shading that looks like it's half CGI and from a completely different movie. It reminded me of a PS1 video game character like Spyro. But anyway, the best part of the film is definitely the romance between Meg and Hercules. The ending when Hercules dives into the river Styx to recover Meg's spirit is powerful, and it proves that both of these characters are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for one another due to their love for each other. They don't just say they're in love, they actually act on their feelings and prove it through their selfless actions. Hercules has spent the entirety of the film trying to be reunited with the gods, but when he achieves it, he chooses love and Meg at the end. And Meg does the same for Hercules.
You didn't have to.
People always do crazy things when they're in love.
My number 4 is 1994's The Lion King. The Lion King begins with one of the most magical openings in Disney history. From the first note that Lebo M belts, you can feel that you are about to take part in an epic journey. This is something that I severely missed in the live action version of the film. I remember me and my best friend were waiting to be struck by the intensity of the circle of life, but were left disappointed as the new version just didn't hit us in the same way. But a quick side note, if you haven't seen The Lion King 2 Simba's Pride, Lebo M also has an incredible song in it called He Lives in You, and though this is an unpopular opinion, I think it's even better than The Circle of Life. I also really love that Disney sequel, so much so I even named my beloved cat after Kovu. But anyway, right from the start we are introduced to our villain Scar. He is intimidating and torturing a cute little field mouse, and we are exposed to his brotherly dynamic with Mufasa. Scar is one of the best Disney villains due to his well-written character motivations, and Be Prepared is my favorite song in the whole movie. Jeremy Irons does a stellar job making Scar feel regal, refined, and sophisticated while also being manipulative, cold, and maniacal.
Stick with me, and you'll never go hungry again.
The casting was perfectly done and complemented by James Earl Jones's portrayal of Mufasa, who also has a low voice, but it is warm, comforting, and full of gravitas.
'Cause nobody messes with your dad. Come here, you.
Oh no!
The evil acts that Scar does in this film are dark and foul in many ways, as not only does he lead to the death of Mufasa, he also profoundly scars Simba by blaming him for the death of his father. To make things worse, he then also tries to kill him when he's at his most emotional and vulnerable state. Scar, in my opinion, is next level diabolical, and that comes from him being based off of a Machiavellian villain like Claudius from Hamlet. And with that said, this film features one of the, if not the saddest scene in Disney history, the death of Mufasa. I remember this was the main reason I couldn't rewatch this film as often as I would have liked to as a kid. But due to this scene, it teaches both Simba and the audience a valuable lesson about grief and the different emotions that come with it, such as denial, sadness, anger, and acceptance. The film does a great job blending drama with comedy in a way that doesn't make the shifting of tone too dramatic. It allows the audience to grieve, but not for too long, and livens up the mood with some comedic relief. And though it isn't perfect, it was needed to help the story recover from the very solemn elements that had just occurred. I do think Timon and Pumbaa are a little ridiculous, but Hakuna Matata is an excellent song with a great message that I sometimes need to remember in my own life, to not worry about things outside of my control. The main problem I have with this story is that it perpetuates the us versus them narrative with the way Scar and the hyenas are treated in this animal kingdom. Now, Scar himself was in fact evil and maybe deserved to be exiled, but the hyenas were just animals who were hungry and wanted to eat as well and lavishly as the lions, but unfortunately they fell too low in the animal food chain, and so they were banished to the elephant graveyards due to being
Slobbering, mangy, stupid poachers.
As a result, some weird politics and classism are going on in the story, which are a little weird to see present in a Disney film. I don't think the hyenas as a species should be labeled evil and regress to one-dimensional characters who can only do wrong. But nonetheless, this may be me diving a little too deep into the film's social messaging, and everything else about The Lion King is nothing short of amazing. It is a classic for a reason and is definitely worth all of the praise and accolades it has received. My number 3 is 1996's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So The Hunchback of Notre Dame has the best opening to any Disney film with the bells of Notre Dame and how it introduces Frollo as our villain. I have a huge weakness for Gregorian chants, so this soundtrack is right up my alley. I wish I could have seen this movie in theaters with powerful speakers and surround sound just for the music alone. But the best part of this film, without any doubt, is the menacing and terrifying villain Frollo. In the first few minutes, we see him chase down an innocent mother with her child and kill her on the steps of a cathedral. He then takes Quasimodo and is about to drown him in a well, but is reminded of his fear of hell and what will happen to his soul. If that's not incredibly dark, I don't know what is. Frollo as a character is exceptionally well written. Disney is rarely bold enough to show an evil character who isn't just evil for the sake of being evil, but instead has motivations that are a reflection of real problems we face in our society. He is not just horribly prejudiced and racist, but is also a man who develops an intense obsession for Esmeralda and literally preys on her. He's a symbol of a person who could actually exist in our daily lives, which makes him that much more terrifying. He also commits actual atrocities that have been done throughout history. Like we see him lock up a family in a windmill and try to burn them alive, and we see him actively persecute the Romani people due to his deep, vile bigotry. But aside from being very well written, he also has the greatest villain song, if not the best Disney song of all time, and you can fight me on it. Not only are the lyrics very mature for a Disney song, but the amount of frustration, anger, and hatred present in the music are delivered in the passion of his singing. He's battling with his racism, his fear of sin despite being incredibly sinful, and with his all-consuming lust, so much so that he's threatening to burn Esmeralda at the stake if she refuses to be with him. It's incredibly chilling because this is every woman's worst nightmare, and this kind of persecution has historically happened to many people. The other characters, aside from the gargoyles and Phoebus, but we'll get to them in a second, are also at the top of the Disney game. Quasimodo is an endearing, sweet, and tragic protagonist. He's a character who has been raised to believe that he is a monster, but despite that still has a heart of gold and shows nothing but warmth and compassion to strangers who treat him horribly. His song Out There is fantastic and emotional. It illustrates his longing to be free and his desperate need to be accepted by the world. Esmeralda is a bold, feisty, and strong character who's quick-witted and saves the men in her life not once, but twice.
You fight almost as well as a man.
Funny, I was going to say the same thing about you.
She never once seems like a damsel in distress and always sees the beauty in everyone, even when the rest of society has turned against them. So my main problem with the film is what everyone complains about, the gargoyles. They completely disrupt the dark tone of this movie, and without them, I think the overall film would have been a lot stronger. I selfishly would have loved it to have just been edgy and dark throughout the entire runtime, but I think it would no longer serve a young audience. But the switch in tone, I won't lie, is definitely jarring. Like, for example, we'll go from Frollo burning down parts of Paris, where it is implied that people are literally getting scorched to death, and then we switch to the gargoyles singing A Guy Like You. Phoebus is also extremely one-note and boring. It feels like this film doesn't need him at all. Sure, he's kind, but he's only there to serve as Esmeralda's love interest, which was so unnecessary because her staying single at the end of the film would have very little effect, if no effect at all, on the story. They just wanted an easy way to make Esmeralda reject Quasi without making her seem cold. When Quasimodo saves Esmeralda from being burned at the stake and holds her up to all of Paris, we see him transform from a character scared of even going outside to becoming a strong, courageous hero. And I, like the citizens of Paris, want to triumphantly cheer him on. He has finally been accepted, and it's an excellent illustration of good conquering evil. Number 2 on my list is 1998's Mulan. So this film is my pick for number 2 because it is the Disney Renaissance film I have rewatched the most, probably at least 100 times in my life, and it is the comfort film that I put on whenever I can't fall asleep. That's why I was so devastated when they completely ruined the character of Mulan in the 2020 live action film, but that's a topic for a whole other video. Mulan is a Disney character that I looked up to as a young girl and continue to look up to even now as a grown woman. At the start of the film, she's clumsy, spunky, and a little mischievous. She doesn't conform to society's standards for young women and desperately yearns to make her family proud. When Mulan fails the matchmaker test, she is the embodiment of every person who has ever felt like they have disappointed their parents. She cannot even look her father in the eyes when she returns home, and we get to hear her express her emotions in the song Reflection. The lyrics reflect how Mulan feels like she can't really be herself if she wants to be accepted by society, and it is an anthem to anyone who has ever felt like an outcast. Mulan's strong bond with her father is also one of my favorite parts of the movie because as someone who is very close to my dad, I feel her intense worry and understand why she would take such severe measures to keep him safe. At the end of the day, Mulan is the embodiment of a strong character as she has to go against the grain of her society and becomes a warrior due to her hard work, dedication, and perseverance. And you can actually see her character struggling, learning, and growing in the catchiest Disney song, I'll Make a Man Out of You. In the montage, Mulan proves to not only be selfless and brave, but also incredibly smart and quick-witted. She uses her intelligence to beat her enemies and ultimately saves her father and becomes the hero of all of China. I can honestly go on about her forever because she's everything I look for in a strong heroine. Next, we have Li Shang. I love how he sees Mulan for who she really is and falls in love with her not for superficial reasons, but is emotionally attracted to her character. It's also amusing to watch him try to turn an army that seems incompetent and useless into a group of courageous warriors. I also love all of the side characters, from Mushu, the comic relief sidekick.
My powers are beyond your mortal imagination. For instance, my eyes can see straight through your armor. Oh!
To her hilarious grandmother,
This cricket's a lucky one!
to Yao Ling and Qian Po. Every single character is well written and enrich the scenes they are in. Even Mulan's horse and the cricket are fun characters with spunk and personality. My only problem with this film is that I'll Make a Man Out of You can be interpreted by some as promoting toxic gender roles and quite literally stating what it means to be a man. This can definitely be considered problematic, but I think the inclusion of Mulan in the montage changes the literal meaning of the song. The lyrics are ironic, as Mulan proves throughout the montage that these stereotypical male characteristics are just societal conventions and that a woman can possess all of the traits that are traditionally viewed as masculine. But she also proves Li Shang wrong by using her wit to become the hero of China and not necessarily the quote-unquote manly training he puts her through. The lyrics serve as a reflection of the patriarchal society Mulan is brought up in.
You would do well to teach your daughter to hold her tongue in a man's presence.
And Mulan is defying all that it stands for. I'd also argue that by the end of the film, Yao Ling and Qian Po reject strict gender roles as they are not afraid to embrace traditionally feminine attire to help Mulan save the emperor. And Be a Man plays over this sequence to solidify the irony of the song's lyrics. But also, by the end of the film, Mulan wields her fan, an inherently feminine symbol and the same object she was being forced to use with the matchmaker at the beginning. But this time, she uses it as a weapon to disarm Shan Yu in battle. In my opinion, this is the filmmaker's way of saying that Mulan uses both traditionally masculine and feminine traits to save China, and that neither are mutually exclusive to being a man or a woman. It proves that trying to place a label or define a person with what it means to be a man or woman is toxic and is a construct invented to control people. Society tried to control Mulan with traditionally feminine stereotypes, and Li Shang attempted to control his army with traditionally masculine stereotypes. And at the end, the emperor embraces Mulan for exactly who she is and even decides to add her to his council. And my #1 film, and one I hold dear to my heart, is 1991's Beauty and the Beast. Right from the very first scene, the film exudes magic with Alan Menken's prologue song, along with the captivating narration and visuals. This movie is the very best of the Disney Renaissance because it uses every second of its runtime to push its story forward, making it incredibly compelling and, dare I say, enchanting. Within the first 5 minutes, we hear Belle's I Want song, which tells us everything we need to know about her character. We learn that she loves to read and is curious about the world, that she doesn't quite fit in with the other people in her town, that she's kind, beautiful, and desperately yearning for adventure. The filmmakers were even able to squeeze our main villain Gaston into this sequence, where we learn his key motivation in the film, which is to marry Belle despite her not being interested in him. With that said, every character in this film is interesting, quirky, and fresh. The Beast starts out as a very menacing character as we are introduced to him when he is aggressively intimidating Belle's innocent father and locks him up inside his castle. A character like this can only be redeemed with very competent writing. There's a lot of nuance in how the Beast was animated, and his voice actor, Robbie Benson, does a great job with his line delivery as he made the Beast seem both frightening yet endearing at the same time.
It would give me great pleasure if you would join me for dinner. Please.
Just like Belle, by the end of the film, I fell in love with the Beast and loved seeing him grow into someone worthy of Belle's affection. And also, unlike in other films, there's actually some time taken to develop and build up to their love. The songs Something There and Tale as Old as Time beautifully solidify their love and romantic chemistry. The ballroom sequence is still, in my opinion, one of the most stunning sequences found in any animated film. The rich color palette of gold and royal blue is just so grand, magical, and aesthetically pleasing. And though Gaston is not my favorite Disney Renaissance villain, he is up there with the best, as he feels like a real person and not just some over-the-top character who has no other characteristics than being evil. Gaston feels like some douchey guy you may have gone to school with, and his song is just so good. As a kid, this was my most replayed sequence of the film and probably my most replayed song after I'll Make a Man Out of You. This film also has an extensive ensemble of captivating characters, from Cogsworth to Mrs. Potts to Lumiere and Chip, of course. Every side character has charm and wit, and with the limited 1 hour and 30-minute runtime, the filmmakers still managed to make sure each of them have a very well-defined personality.
And as I always say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Where was I?
And the character of Maurice was a great addition, as he often pulled on my heartstrings. I felt so much empathy for him when the whole town made him into a crazy man when all he wanted was to save his daughter. When he's pleading and begging the town to help him, there's so much sorrow, desperation, and fear in his voice.
Will no one help me?
And I think Belle is the perfect Disney princess, as she has a lot of agency and power in all of her decisions, and also stays open-minded throughout the whole film. She goes against the deal she made with the Beast when she leaves the castle in anger, and this is done entirely on her own accord. The only reason she doesn't make it back to her town is that she gets attacked by an angry pack of wolves and the Beast saves her. When he collapses in front of her due to his wounds, Belle chooses to take him back to the castle due to her compassion and empathy for him. She never fails to speak her mind and is selfless but feisty when she needs to be.
Well, you should learn to control your temper.
To sum everything up, Beauty and the Beast is lightning in a bottle, as it has strong characters, a wonderful story, a memorable soundtrack, and stunning animation. It is the culmination of everything that made Disney animation special during the Renaissance era and is nothing short of magical. So those are my thoughts on all of the Disney Renaissance films, and I know these lists are often polarizing, as most of the films are classics in their own right. So I am very curious to learn what your personal ranking list is, and if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.